friends and family, welcome for this evening. To start on the subject of my book, I think it's a very personal journey. The book has nothing to do with me as I can see it. It's more to do with what I saw in tourism as I lived through my professional life since 1972. It's a small journey of 51 years, and happy to be here with all of you here this evening. A quick take on the book, and hopefully Barkha was asking me what is the mission mode for the evening. I think the roadmap for Indian tourism is what I'm looking for. If we can have some little milestones or little pegs on which we can put our tourism game plan forward in the next couple of years. If you chance through the book, I think what I'm trying to say is that I've worked very closely with the Ministry of Tourism. I'm in a unique position where I've seen success. And I think somewhere I must confess that some kind of a consistency is missing from year to year over decades. I can't look back and think of any consistency at the center at all. So I don't know what we are talking about for all my tourism that I've spent these last 5 decades. My take is that the ministry is not empowered to either join the dots. So whatever we are talking of tourism, it's confined largely to hotels and tour operators. They are, to my mind, I've written in the book, are facilitators. They are not the product, they are not India's tourism. And somewhere India's tourism story is yet to start. So somebody has to kickstart it, hopefully. The panel today is also different from the usual. I've requested my friends from years to be here. The fact that Barkha is here today is itself in itself an indicator that we want to do things differently.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me right at the back. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. Some of you are faces I remember from my childhood. I grew up in a home where how to make India's tourism story better was a dining table conversation, because my father was also in the tourism industry and many of you knew him. So thank you, Mr. Berry, for calling me to moderate this conversation. We have about 30 minutes, so I'm going to request the panel to keep their comments short, and maybe we'll manage to squeeze in some questions from the floor as well. I think Kishore already framed the heart of the conversation. There's no point when we talk about tourism in improving one or the other facet of India, right? Whether you look at aviation, or you look at hotels, or you look at amenities, there's an interconnectedness at the heart of it. And before I actually come to Navin to talk a little bit about his book, Aman, you wanted to talk about the interconnectedness and the joining of the dots. So let's start with you. Let's start with each of you giving one takeaway that you had from reading the book, and I'll give the last comment then to Mr. Berry. Go ahead, Aman.
No, Navin said that I should look at a particular section where he talks about connecting the dots. So I think that the tourism industry is an elephant, really, a lumbering elephant, and there's nobody to blame, because how do you connect an elephant which is with all the legs walking in different directions? So if I was to do this book, if it was not an autobiography, I would have called the book Ankush. Ankush being the goad which pokes the elephant and tells him to move. So I think you've been that goad, because you've been trying very hard to connect the dots, because there are so many ministries.
But what's stopping the elephant from moving?
No, the system, I think,
No, I'm actually asking a serious question.
Yeah.
If you had to sort of say, this is the elephant, and this is why, it needs to move. It needs to move, but it's kind of stuck in the same place in the forest.
It needs to move because the ministries can't move by themselves. I often feel that we have many ministries and we need one more, which should be called the Inter-Ministerial Liaison Committee. Because when you talk to tourism, they say forest doesn't listen to us. When you talk to forest, then they say something. So if they are not able to coordinate, and they need a Navin Berry to kind of put them on a forum, to go through the whole exercise of assembling them. I've seen you do it for years. So, I mean, this is a kind of in-house thing. I mean, I'm not trying to be critical, but since we are introspecting, I feel, let me even take a name. Suppose Mr. Nakula Anand was the Minister of Tourism. Would things be different? We have faith in him, and you know, the dynamism, and he would be able to make things happen in a way.
So are you suggesting that if someone from the trade was in government, it would be different?
I think so. Somebody who's established themselves, because you would never have a situation that you've got funds and they lapse because you don't know what to do, because you know the players. If somebody is very good at wildlife tourism, then why should the ministry set up 20 people and have meetings? They should empower that person to do it. And I think private sector would shake it much better.
Okay, let's take that thought to you, Iqbal. Is that what you would pick up, that, you know, when you were going through Navin's book, what stayed with you? What did you agree with? What did you disagree with?
Hello.
Yeah.
Well, when I got Navin's book last evening, he rang me up and said at gunpoint that you've got to read through it. So I spent quite a bit of time going through it. And then I went to my computer and I switched on Wikipedia. And I saw some interesting figures. Foreign tourist arrivals in 1997 were 2.37 million. And in 2022, in 25 years, they've just gone up to 6.19 million. Of course, there was a spike about 10 million, and there was a pandemic, but it came down to 6.19. And earnings from foreign tourism in 1997 were $2.9 billion. And in 2020, they were just $6.9 billion. Now, I've always wondered how countries like Egypt, Greece, and Peru have been so successful in marketing their ruins and making billions of dollars out of them. And how countries like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Namibia, Botswana, you name it, have been successful in marketing their wildlife and made millions out of it, billions. So I just figured that there must be some reason. And I looked at three factors that struck me. My exposure to tourism is because my wife and I have produced about 6 travel shows over the last 25 years. We haven't done one for the last 10 years. And I came out with 3 factors. The first was price. And I found that you find that India is not a price competitive market because the burden of indirect taxation, which is levied on the poor tourist, is very unattractive for him. And if you look at countries like Sri Lanka, and then you look at Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, you've got much better options at much lower prices. The second thing I noticed was infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is necessary to provide accessibility. So if you look at, say for example, wildlife. In Africa, you've got all these plethora of small charter companies, air charter companies, that have these single-engined and 2-engine turboprops. And they can fly you anywhere. And within Africa, across borders. So why hasn't that air charter industry been established in India to link up all the wildlife sites and all the forts? Because that's again a great thematic subject and of interest as we come back to the lack of our ability to market our ruins. And the third thing is the experience of the traveler who comes to India, and does he want to come back, and does he want to be preached at? We have a moral police in operation. Do people want to be judged when they come here on what they're doing and how they're behaving? There used to be a lot of tourists in Goa at one time, 30 years ago, foreign tourists. And if I remember, about 50 years ago, we had a family guru called Baba Neem Karoli, and in his ashram, I have seen Steve Jobs and Richard Alpert. Richard Alpert was the guy who founded or discovered LSD, and Steve Jobs is, the founder of Apple. Now, these are icons, and for some reason, nobody in India thought of using them to endorse India as a great destination for spiritual or tourism as against religious tourism, but spiritual tourism. So there are many issues over here, and nobody has looked at it holistically and try to figure out that do we really want to do something about it, or do we just want to say, हाँ ठीक है चलता है.
So let me flip it around and take that to Mr. Keswani, because actually when those of us who travel outside India, one of the things, if you're not talking about the East, you mentioned a lot of the countries in the East or Sri Lanka, but if you go to the West, the hotels are crappy, right? And you're paying a lot for really poor service. And I mean, most of us would have at some point said, oh my God, our service industry is so much better. Indian hotels, by and large, really are exceptional. Why then, or what then is the problem?
I think, well, I have not come here as a hotelier.
Yes, but I mean, I'm just trying to structure this conversation, but go ahead.
So I'm going to go off
go,
your question.
Okay, sure.
See, I love your book. Thank you, Navin, for sending it to me yesterday. And I read it today in the car. And I think it's very well written, very topical. And in fact, I've been talking to the secretary. She had called me a couple of times about how we should change tourism just in the last 3 weeks. And you know, it's a very simple thing. When do things work and when do they not work? If there are 50 voices, and we are a democracy and we are proud of it, but there is no alignment, then nothing will work. Each individual stakeholder will do what is best for him or herself. I think a very fundamental issue in our country is that we talk about where we want to go, but nobody asks how we're going to execute it. And therefore, your recommendation that there should be a nodal. If you are really interested in getting it to work, it needs 2 things. The problem is tourism is a state subject. It must be in the concurrent list, number 1, which means the center has some say. Number 2, there should be a leader, like you recommended, who has the power to get things done, obviously with vision. And you can define that vision. That could be a democratic decision. Take the inputs of 100 stakeholders, but one person to execute. My view is simply that, and what I have been putting forward through the Hotel Association and to various government officials is, it is a business that could transform our demographic dividend. It has to be seen as a political economy decision, not as an economic decision, because it could easily absorb the 10 to 15 million guys who need a job every year. We could absorb half of them for the next 10 years. It could change it could improve India's demographic dividend. So therefore, rather than talk about hotels, which is one subset, or XYZ, see, we are all visitors here. We are all tourists. I like what you said, visitor economy. Each and every one of us is a visitor somewhere. That's the human condition. So it's overarching. I wouldn't talk about, this aspect or that. I would say somebody has to take a call, and it's the Prime Minister, by the way, who has to say, I'm going to give a part of my political capital. I'm going to set up this agency, whether it's in the PMO, that's all structured. With his political heft and show transformation. What has happened with, look at the national highways. Isn't that led as a mission? It's insane what they've done. Even airports, it's all been unleashed. See, entrepreneurial energy will come, but somebody has to channel it. So that's my only comment, that it's a beautiful book. I hope Mr. Modi reads it and gets inspired by it, because it certainly inspired me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point actually about the analogy, Rajiv, with the highways. That when you put your mind to something, the infrastructure story of India has been pretty great when you look at it in terms of the state of airports, the state of roads, and if you actually think of it as something that benefits the political economy, creates jobs, not just as a niche area that you're having a tourism discussion. Rajiv, you've been in one way or the other in the space of branding India to the world with arts, with textiles, with so much of our sort of heritage, as it were. What's holding us back?
Great to see so many friends, and as long as I remember, Navin, but my 5 points of intervention would be very brief, and I made them briefer, and we've discussed this over so many decades. I recall meeting my friend Navin in the 70s of the last century, and we would often travel on a bus to and fro from Chandigarh. His destination, India, was his passionate article of faith. And the sheer invention of tourism in the early sort of newly created state of Haryana was one of his very consistent beats. And I recall Chappie Mishra was central to both of us as young men. And Navin got to write plenty about the many birds perched on state highways as tourist complexes, out of creating the highways, in fact, but also going into Pagdandis, which bought out things from the villages, bought out places which nobody would have gone to. They didn't know they existed. Roads went to that area principally because of what Chappie had in mind to create that network. And then my plans, of course, was different. I wasn't talking about the tourist complex, although I was assigned one to work with. When I finished, those plans was on a rural hub created by villagers themselves, and but it never took off to spark the concept of rural tourism. And rural tourism is, of course, what you refer to right now. But I said domestic tourists, whether it's dharamsalas, yes, dharamsalas haven't come to the formal infrastructure, but Guni Jamkhanas and Bara Balutedar, things that could have been set up where directly the stakeholders could benefit from intervention, never really happened. Rural youth were never really, especially in tribal areas, through co-op modes, cooperatives were never really considered. And when I see many people here, and Navin, after so many years, we've been speaking about it's all very familiar. It's things that are not new. I'm repeating what has been said. There was a whole issue of orientation of local people as guides of old histories, connecting the tangible with the intangible resonances. There was an interfacing of traditional knowledge systems with evolving technologies, indigenous like beauty clinics and in villages created for small towns and bastis as part of health tourism, but never really occurred as health tourism. But creating an annual collection of our best souvenirs, our takeaways, a mapping of skilled craftspeople, its conversion to utilitarian objects offered a huge imaginative canvas. We could have mobile kiosks, retails, and hearts near tourist spots, but nothing really happened. And that is the problem. We get the present highway presentation. I made an appeal to the minister saying that, which you mentioned again and again, that connecting arts and crafts to infrastructure would be the next thing. It just can't be left to emporiums and museums. It has to go into rest houses. It has to go to villages. It has to go to where people go. And why should all highways be for freight? It could be slow travel, and doesn't have to go by air. But I think the more poor one is, the more extraordinary the hospitality, the khidmatgars. This is a paradox between poverty and culture, and and also this whole hospitality thing. Atiti Devo Bhava, we say, but can the motivation for making money be equated to making a visitor feel like a god? Do we present a bill to devtas? And now the greatest luxury has no price tag attached to it. And we know this and have experienced it. I know I'm being totally idealistic, I'm nothing else all these 70 years, but how to make a business out of something that is best offered free is the dichotomy. And I still don't know that hospitality, when it gets converted to a business, which most of I've been talking to Navin on often, that all the gatherings are always hoteliers and people in the trade. But really, when we talk of Atiti Deva Bhava, then it's everyone. So there are many, many issues that come on the way when we get to the Pagdandi and we get off the highway. And these have been taken up over the last 60 years. I know when Navin has mentioned them in the book here and there, but I do not know why it doesn't really start showing some concrete results.
Thank you, Rajiv. I think, thank you for that. Navin Berry, I think we must bring you into the conversation. With this book, obviously you had a ringside view of what's been happening in this space for so many years. The one thing that everybody seems to agree on is a kind of holistic approach. There have been many ideas from this stage itself, a nodal officer, a nodal ministry, someone from the trade in government, air charters between forts and wildlife sanctuaries. If there was one thing, if you were given a magic wand and you were asked to change one thing, you have the power to change one thing immediately, what would that be?
That's a tough question, but let me try and answer it. Somewhere I feel that we've been laboring over too many things for too long, and they haven't fructified. And we are still struggling to say, let's do this. For example, we have Secretary Tourism, recently Mr. Arvind Singh sitting here, the National Tourism Board or a national committee or something. I mean, these are very honestly, in my very considered, very personal opinion, old hat. It's all gone and dusted. Now to have a tourism board after Muhammad Yunus committee recommended it almost 40 years ago, I mean, it's inane now, it's not relevant. And we are still struggling to do those things. The other day I heard about Visit India here. I mean, Visit India here has been tried, it's over. So let's do something different. So we are still struggling with ideas from the past. And I have written in a book that travel and tourism is going to prosper. There is no pulling it back. Nobody is going to pull back travel and tourism. It's going to happen regardless of governments, regardless of anybody. There is that momentum in our economy. Domestic tourism, domestic tourists, foreigners, they will keep coming. So there's no threat to travel and tourism happening. But if you want to make a quantum difference to how tourism happens, then you will have to make a break from the past and look at new things to happen.
What's the one fundamental break from the past that you think we have to do?
I think people haven't understood the magic or the power of tourism. And people still are struggling, in my opinion, still to think either we think it's elitist or we think it doesn't matter. We have all got, all the connotations we have are all incorrect. The right one has not happened, that it is actually, tourism is the magic wand. Tourism is the magic wand. Tourism can transfer everything that's happening in the country. And the greatest thing that is happening today in the world of tourism is experiential. The experiential wraps up our hinterland. It captures the essence of India. So if you want Bharat, that's experiential. It's not sitting in your Delhi, Bombay and Calcutta. So you have that opportunity to actually encash on experiential. The thing is there, somebody has to put it together.
Things can't be just put on show. They are important to be able to create the magic of India. But I like the parts in your book where you very pragmatically state that unless these facilities are not enjoyed by the people themselves, what are we talking about tourism? There has to be a certain level of integration, and also people must, tourism is, Paryatan still, if you utter the word Paryatan, they'll think the word's not a word people understand in the villages of India. So I think that point that it has to get more than just being tourist. So tourism has to reinvent its name, it has to become part of something much bigger.
Maybe we can get everybody to quickly. Aman, you want to take that?
Yeah, I want to say that the book should also be read because it is the collective memory of tourism in India, post-independence almost. What not to do, because if you read between the lines, you say, okay, they were fantastic people, some of whom are here. They tried their best, but because the mindset wasn't changed, and it still hasn't changed, because when you go to a village, I've just come from Benares, it's shocking to see how desperately our aspirations are to become Western, In the news programs, in the conferences, all the girls have to wear red mini skirts. I mean, what happened to the sari? So if you are talking tourism, and we are still ashamed, in Benares, this morning one man was talking to me only in bad English. So I said, मैं भारतीय हूँ, आप मेरे से हिंदी में बात कर सकते हैं. So he was demonstrating superiority by talking English. So the double standards, I think, in tourism have to go. All of us know, for example, the state in which the maximum alcohol is drunk. Do you know which one it is? Gujarat. Okay? And that is meant to be a dry state. So who's got the dots on the I's? And who are we fooling? So we have to get it right.
I think I want to pick up the last point of this homogenizing, westernization, globalization, which is actually taking away from our own sort of subcultures. Iqbal, do you think that's the problem? There is one idea of modernity, malls, you know, and like they're actually just depth for, I don't know, history, culture.
I think everything has to go together. You cannot say that pass a judgment against malls, or you can't pass a judgment against some other kind of structure, because the fact is that we need to create employment, and tourism is a great means of creating employment. Our country in the last 20 years has suffered from too much competition from China, and it has deindustrialized itself. Manufacturing has been badly wiped out, and without those jobs that manufacturing could have produced, if you have to turn to the service sector, tourism is a great thing. And right from the micro level right up to the macro level, you need to really give it a big push. Now the question is that who are the minds who are going to get together and figure out an order of how we need to execute this and how we need to push this forward.
Well, I see Mr. Amitabh Kant walking in right on cue for all these suggestions. Navin. But Amitabh, if I can just bring you in with initial thoughts, and of course there was a reference earlier to the whole Incredible India moment, but Navin was also making the argument that we need new ideas as we move ahead, so please.
So, well, I'm a believer that, India needs to grow at rates of 9 to 10% per annum, year after year. If India grows, that means your infrastructure will grow. You'll get new airports, you'll get new roads, you'll get new convention centers like the one in Pragati Maidan and Dwarka, and I think every state of India, every major city of India should have a convention center of this quality to drive the MICE, the meetings, incentives, convention, exhibition markets. So tourism is a subset of the Indian economy. You can never look at tourism in isolation. If India grows, India's hard power grows, India's soft power will automatically grow, and India's tourism will grow by leaps and bounds. Earlier, you didn't have airports, you didn't have airlines, you didn't have carriers which will bring in people, you didn't have destinations. All that is dramatically changing. And I think all that you need now is 7, 8 state champions. If you have, India's got phenomenal tourism products. If you have about 10 states saying that I'm going to create jobs, tourism has to be seen from the perspective of the fact that while India is going to grow, the sector which is going to create jobs is travel and tourism. It has the biggest multiplier impact. Its multiplier impact across handloom, handicraft, crafts, culture, all that is just phenomenal. For every job that you create in tourism, you create 10 other jobs. And therefore, we should not talk in tourism in isolation. We should just talk about the failure of tourism industry is that it's never said that it's the biggest job creator. And it's the biggest job creator. If India wants to grow with jobs, tourism is the answer.
Yeah. Actually, I think you, Mr. Keswani, you made that point earlier. Aman, if you want to, I
want to say that actually the tourism minister, when you look at the hierarchy of ministers, is somewhere down the line for some reason. He's like, like somebody who makes you laugh in a film. He should be next to the finance minister and maybe above him, because if France has a population of 70 million and can get 92 million tourists, imagine if you got 1.5 billion tourists. I mean, the whole economy, and the tourism minister would be handing out money to the finance minister. So we have to take ourselves much more. The valley of the Loire in France gets more tourists than the whole of India, and that is just the size of Shekhawati, which is 1/7 of Rajasthan. So it's a matter of shame, even I would say, that with everything in place, now we have infrastructure in place also. When you go to the American airports, you think you've come to the third world. No.
Yeah, the hellhole called JFK. Did you want to just add to your point about political economy?
Just wanted to respond to Aman's point. You know, I mean, it's to my mind, it's not a correct analogy because, you know, tourism is essentially worldwide, is regional in character. Europe people travel, you know, so it's not within people. People just travel by car from one part of Europe to another because they don't need passports. In India, you know, the challenge with India is that you got Pakistan on one side, you got Afghanistan on another side, you got China on the third side. So the South Asia region is the least integrated region in terms of, so you don't get regional tourists. Otherwise, you'll have a billion plus people traveling to India. India is a long haul destination. So people who come to India prepare for coming here, but India gets tourists who have the longest stays here. So my philosophy always has been that since India is so heavily overpopulated, we should focus on upmarket, high-value tourists, and not focus on people. You know, the focus must be on unit value realization. If you get high-value tourists, that will have a huge impact on India's growth story.
So, okay. See, the thing is that I have 10,000 employees in my company. 8,000 of them are class 10 or less. 1,000 are disabled. We did this consciously. These are unemployable people. And let me tell you, across the spectrum of tourism, this bunch, because India still has, I think, 20-30% not literate. Tourism needs functional literacy, not educational literacy. That's the key. What we need is like we said, a national leader, like the Prime Minister himself, with that level of political capital. And you need some competitiveness across states. One state proves it works. States are so competitive today that chief ministers go after a single silly project of $2 billion the chief minister is running. Can you imagine a chief minister who transforms his state from the tourism perspective, shows that it employs people who otherwise are potentially unemployable in this country? What it would do. So to me, it's simply a political economy decision. That's my view. I mean, everything else will flow from that.
Economic indices as the one way to measure travel, and I want another word other than tourism. I think there's much, much more to people going out, reaching out than high-end tourists who can pay big bucks for reviving our economy. I think there's a huge amount to be said about creativity at the in the rural areas where there are people who want to meet people, who want to have extended market. Whether that comes into the formal nomenclature of tourism as you're speaking, Amitabh, I don't know, because I think these are things that we've been speaking about for about 60 years, but they still haven't been able to see a coherent action on the field. So you can call it tourism and you can say, okay, domestic tourism or rural tourism, but I think it's a little more than just tourism. I think there's an ecosystem that creates, and it's the ecosystem that I'm talking about. Tourism is one end of the spectrum, an important one, but I think we're talking about an ecosystem of appreciation, of conservation, of identity, of values, of not just doing bandbazing and being, you know, just an experience. I think we have to retain something for ourselves.
So Rajiv, I was talking from another perspective, and that is that mass tourism across the world has actually destroyed cultures. You know, and I've seen this from very close quarters. It has led to huge, unplanned, unsustainable development. It's led to encroachment, and therefore I'm not in favor of mass tourism. India is full of great experiences, from rural areas to wildlife to heritage to everything. What we should promote and market is unique experiences of India. That needs to be done. But the positioning of the product should always be aspirational. It should never be low value.
Let me just ask you, before you came in, there was a suggestion from many of the speakers here about having someone who understands the trade in government. And I think Aman has repeatedly made the reference to why the Minister for Tourism is not up there when it's directly connected to the economy. Do you think there's merit in that, you yourself is somebody, represents somebody who's a technocrat with years of experience in government? Do we need more of that?
See, my belief, really, frankly, is that tourism ministry, it's. I'm being very honest that if India grows, if you're able to create great infrastructure, if we have created 55,000 kilometers of road in the last 7-8 years, you've created, you've provided accessibility to all the destinations now, top-class quality roads. If you've built 30 new airports, you've provided airports to all Tier 2, Tier 3 cities now, which didn't exist earlier. And if you've been able to really provide the last mile connectivity to the travel and tourism destinations, which has never existed in my time, and you've seen the emergence of 2-tier clean sheets, clean bedrooms, hotels and resorts now, which never existed in my time, that means the tourism has come of age. You don't need a tourism ministry, according to me. Yeah. You don't. Honestly.
Need, so who would take the decision?
Why do you need decisions? You need tourism as a state subject. It should be driven by the states.
Well, we have the exact opposite argument here, where people are arguing for it to be a central subject.
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because Kerala has demonstrated that Kerala grew and became one of the greatest destinations of the world. It's been ranked as one of the finest destinations of the world, not backed by central government, with zero contribution from central government. Give the ownership to the states, make them responsible. What he's saying, rank the states, name and shame them. Without the states, you can't deliver tourism.
Okay, anyone wants to respond to that before? Ms. Navin, I think we should give you a comment before we formally launch your book. If you want to say anything to Amitabh, ask.
No, I think there's room for both. Your high end is very good, and you can also have the rest of India, otherwise they'll get isolated.
Yeah, I know. I think Amitabh has to leave, so let's just officially at least launch the book. And Navin, it's over to you.
Yes, I think we've had some very good contributions, inputs. But Kishore, would you like to just share with us very quickly some of your takes, because you've gone through the entire manuscript just as much as I have.
Hi. Evening. It's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. And these faces were first introduced to me by Navin when, as a 20-year-old, I joined him in 1979. We worked together over a long period, several years, worked on several new products, etc., all of which, of course, he shares in the book. This book, of course, has been in the making the last 50 years. And it's been in the making the last 50 years simply because Navin has lived his journey. He's experienced what tourism has been about, both as someone who's seen it, interviewed people, worked with some of the leaders of the Department of Tourism, Ministry of Tourism, the private sector, etc. And the fact that he, 50 years later, puts this together into a basket and brings it out in the form of the book that we have that's being launched this evening, I think is resonant with not just his experiences, but also the way forward. I'm just sharing some key takeaways from his book, which I think would also be interesting for this panel to look at in terms of a discussion. The first, which he extols fairly powerfully, is the idea that tourism is everybody's business. It's everybody's business. It's yours and mine. It is, of course, the tourists, but it's also the shikarawalas, the coconut sellers, etc. And somehow it's been seen in isolation as part of a very exclusive club. It has to move out of that exclusive club, out of that suit bootki kind of positioning, into every man's product, both as a consumer as well as someone who benefits from it. I think that's an extremely important take from it. the corollary that comes from it, and I think Navin mentions it, is the fact that the Ministry of Tourism, as an enabler, doesn't have the teeth to actually do very much more than state a position, and that lack of consistency that he talks about. But tourism is everybody else's business, every other ministry's business. It is the business of the highways, the airports, aviation, culture, food. It belongs to the shopping malls, civic amenities, etc. All the elements that go into serving the civic amenities for you and me as people, as citizens of the country. If that product meets our requirements, it meets the requirements of the tourists. I think that, again, is a very important takeaway in terms of how to look at and understand the tourism product. These civic amenities, of course, include everything from better cities, cleanliness, hygiene, safety, security, transportation, signages, electricity, toilets, drinking water, food stalls, friendly police. If we have that for the citizens of our country, the tourism product is automatically enabled. He makes a mention of course, the Incredible India campaign and the role it played in positioning India as an international tourism product. However, Incredible India 2/3/4, variants of it have not moved forward. We've stayed stuck in that same place. So why and who provides this thrust becomes an important element to study. I think what he's also talking about is the very nature of the travel economy and the possibility of a national tourism mission. I think the possibility of a national tourism mission, what it can contribute, etc., the fact of certain redundancies in terms of the industry associations because of their sheer limitation in terms of the roles that they play, when in fact tourism should represent a much larger body of people. I think those are elements to look at.
And may I request that we formally release the book, and may I request Mr. S.K. Misra, please sir, if you could come on stage, and Mr. Dugal, please join us. Mr. Arvind Singh, please come up on stage. You are, for us in this audience, you are still Secretary to them.
Thank you, Navin. Firstly, I would like to congratulate Navin on this book. It should have come much earlier. Navin can very justly be regarded as the pioneer of tourism promotion. What he's achieved, and during those days when tourism, it was difficult to, our aim was to get 1 million tourists. And when we achieved that, it was like scaling Mount Everest. What Navin was able to achieve was because of his passion, his innovativeness, his vision, his dedication, and that led to a new thinking, and his greatest achievement, I would say, was Satay. Satay as a travel mart set up standards that were hitherto unknown. It was amazing that this travel mart, which lasted for how many, 18 years or what? Well, for a very long time, about 25 states, 30 countries, and the inclusion of IDPP without paying them anything was a remarkable achievement. It set the tone. I don't know whether Navin remembers that I told him, you've raised standards, you have created, achieved success, but you are now going to be targeted. Success breeds enemies, creates enemies, and that is exactly what happened, which led to Sati being given up with people who are not, who tried to destroy him, and unfortunately, in which the then ministry played a part. It was very unfortunate. One great thing that I found about Navin was that he was willing to admit his mistakes. I remember as secretary, he was doing a publication for us and had already printed about 5,000 copies, in which instead of the picture of the Victoria Memorial in Calcutta, there was a picture of the Vatican. And my friend, our ambassador to Italy, brought it to my notice, and I was absolutely shocked. So I called Navin. I said, "No, what is this?" He couldn't explain. But he said, "So, I'll bring out fresh issues of the same publication. I'm willing to incur the loss that has happened." Now, that was something great. I first met Navin, I now know him for more than 50 years, was when I was in Haryana, and he came to me with a proposal. Instinctively, I felt that he is a person whom I could trust. And it took me not more than 5 to 10 minutes to tell him, go ahead. He just didn't know what to make of it. And went to my deputy, Ashok Pava, asked him, what does this mean? He said, means go ahead. So I'm glad that I backed the right horse. Subsequently, while I was in tourism, in order to bring about greater interaction between the field officers and the headquarters, we sat together and decided that there was need for a publication called Know India, in which it was a monthly publication, and we used to sit together, and then I would ask Navin to write an editorial containing latest developments, policy changes, and what we said was that there should be interchange of information between the various regional directors, so each region would contribute to what they were doing in their respective fields, and that led to a tremendous enthusiasm in the staff and brought about great results. So, in passing, I would just like to make one or two comments. Amarnath mentioned France as number of tourists they're getting and number of tourists we're getting. With due respect to you, I do not agree with you. You cannot compare France. What are the number of days that a tourist spends in France? Compare it to India. Multiply that and then you get the real figures. Apart from that, I entirely agree with Amitabh, that mass tourism will destroy the country. Imagine 30, 40 million people descending on the country. It doesn't make sense. It has to be selective. And one area that we have to prove. Firstly, what is the objective of tourism? Objective, so far as India is concerned, the objective of tourism should be to improve the lives of millions of people, to have a direct impact on them. In a very small way, when I was secretary, I started the Surajpur Mela. Now, what is the purpose behind it? The purpose behind it was that our crafts were one of the major attractions, but our craftsmen had been neglected. Earlier, they had their patronage of Maharajas and all that. So we said tourism should act as a patron of the crafts. And so we got master craftsmen from all over the country, and the rest is, at that time there were doubting Thomases whether it will succeed. Now more than 35 years have passed and it's a big success. So I think what we need to do is now we have to move to new areas. And new areas, domestic tourism, I remember in the 70s I had a big argument in a meeting with Indra Sharma, and I said domestic tourism is the bedrock of Indian tourism. You must promote domestic tourism and not just be concerned with foreign exchange earnings. Now, domestic tourism has caught on, but now what we need to do, where it has direct impact on the people, is rural tourism. In promoting rural tourism, you would be achieving the vision of Mahatma Gandhi. It has a direct impact on this thing. For rural tourism, you have to develop the rural sector. Rural sector will benefit tourism. And a large number of tourists who come to India are interested in seeing the real India, not move from one five-star hotel to another. And then you can link their stay in a urban center like Agra or Banaras or something and take them to the interior. So I think now, Navin, you've done a lot for this. I think your focus now should be on rural tourism. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Misra. Thank you very much. Get me coming to the most pleasant part of the evening. My vote of thanks to all of you here. Meera, thank you. I just want to thank all of you here for reviving all our associations from the past and making a very memorable evening. A quick mention of the book itself. Like I think Kishore mentioned, the book has been in the works for some time. But just about 15 days ago, I took a decision that let's get it out. And we fixed a date, 25th. Then the idea was, who will go to edit it and get it out? So Kishore chipped in. We were looking for a cover, and my son suggested, why don't you ask Satish ji for some ideas on what a book cover can be. So Mr. Satish Gupta volunteered to share some of his images. And we have a lovely bit of a poem from the artist. Time just flows, yet we choose to mark each obstacle. And I think that's what the book is all about, marking each one of our obstacles in my journey. And to Leela Hotels for making this event such a success. I think it's an awesome venue and great tribute to the founder. And really remembering Captain Nair today, who also figures in the book in a chapter. So, and thank you very much, Mr. Kant, for being here. I know he is just dropping in between some 4-5 of his engagements. Thank you very much for being here. All my fellow panelists for contributing to the discussions. I hope there's going to be some way forward coming out of here. I remember Mr. Dugal asking me at one of our BITV conclaves, it's mentioned in my book also, कि ये सब कुछ कर रहे हो, इसका नतीजा क्या निकलेगा? So I said, that's really difficult for me to say, but all I can endeavor is to carry on with the task, and I hope that this book is going to be a little break and maybe a start of something new to happen in the years ahead. May I request all of you to please stay on and enjoy a drink with me. Thank you.